Good evening, everyone. Welcome to another edition of the Gray Area here on the Black Man Unfiltered Network, simulcasting on the Sparta HQ Network. I'm Mr. Bennett, joined by my partner, as always,
This is Sparta!
the Ghost of Sparta, a.k.a. Peter, a.k.a. Panayotis. Yasu, my brother, what is going on?
What is going on, man? How are you tonight?
I am well. Good weekend so far. Certainly good bit of shows over the weekend that we had done on the Sparta channel. So hopefully you guys hop over to the Sparta channel and check some of those shows out. Some good content there, and just have a fun time. Certainly we deal with a lot of serious stuff in the world, so sometimes just having a hangout show, we can kind of kick back and reminisce over old stuff. It's always good. So, certainly you can hop over to the Sparta HQ Network, drop a like button there, as well as on this channel here as you come in. Certainly we appreciate the support that you guys give us, and certainly anything that you want to contribute to the channel, you can drop a Cash App or Super Chat in the chat. So again, you have the Black Man Unfiltered Cash App, Black Man Unfiltered, and like I said, the Super Chat option is available. You can also, anything that you want to give to us personally, we have our own individual Cash App, so you can certainly drop to mine or Pete's. And again, we appreciate the support. And see, like, we already got a lively crowd with us. Anytime you mention taxes, that certainly gets people coming out to talk about the issue. So we basically, this is sort of a part two of a show that we did last week. And we were talking about nonprofits, and we were talking about how a lot of these organizations are business entities like the PGA, and they're able to, certainly bring in a lot of revenue. Some organizations in the billions of dollars. The heads of these organizations make tens of millions of dollars, and but they're exempt from a lot of taxes. In paying taxes. Now, again, depending on your perspective, you may want to be one of those persons that's right. I want to pay as few taxes as possible. And so we already got some of the people in the house, or the lunatic libertarian. Actually, we may come down your be down your alley tonight with some of the proposals tonight. So again, all centralized systems are failed, and again, taxes are extortion. So a lot of people certainly believe that, and for some people, they're very comfortable with not paying taxes at all. I mean, it's like it's smart. We have our president who talked about when he early campaigned, that says, watch out, you're stupid if you're paying taxes. There's so many ways you can hide money, put money into certain assets and whatnot. And for a lot of people, they create a lot of nonprofit 501c organizations for that reason, to hide money or shield money from taxes and things of that nature. And so people are asking the question, well, what about just the issue of taxes in general? Maybe there's something better that we could be doing to make a system that's more fair, more equitable. And again, you're going to have people debating on all sides. Certainly, you have people at economists and whatnot to debate these issues. So this is well over our pay grade. But again, we're not experts in anything here. It's just me and Peter. We just like to have weekly conversations, just giving our 2 cents on how we feel about issues. You may feel differently, and that's perfectly fine for you to feel differently from what we're saying, but we're not, offering necessary solutions here. But this is a conversation. We try to have a respectful conversation every week. And, you may rock with us on certain issues. You may not rock with us. And again, that's perfectly fine. All we ask that certainly in the chats, be respectful of those in the chat, and certainly anybody who wants to gaslight people, we'll block you. Bottom line, we don't tolerate a lot of nonsense here in this channel. Now, next week we're going to have a call-in show. So every fourth show is a call-in show. So any points you want to make, because a lot of people say, hey, drop the link, I want to give my perspective. If we did that every show, we'd have 4 or 5 hour shows every week, and we just can't do that. We're busy professionals and whatnot. We got things to do, so we don't open up the phone lines for people to call in on a live topic. But anything that we've talked about in prior shows, when we drop the link in the call-in show next week, anything that you want to address, you can come up in that and address your points in that show. Again, keep it respectful. You have to show your face. Keep it respectful. And let's have a conversation, and not just a platform for you to just, go on a soapbox about a particular issue. That's not what the show is about either as well.
Right.
So we keep, some standards here. But go ahead, Pete. Anything you want to say on the issue?
So a couple weeks ago, when we had it was the last week, call one before that. We gave it opportunity for somebody to come on who couldn't get his camera working, and he got kicked off immediately. He was
Yeah.
disrespectful, and it was inappropriate what he said and he did. So we're not having you not on camera anymore. Simple as that. If you
Yeah.
can't do your camera, I'm sorry, you can't come on. Very simple.
Yeah.
If you're an iPhone, it's a way around iPhone. You have an Android. I have worked both systems. There's always a way if you really want to put your 2 cents in.
Yeah.
So that's all I want to say to that, because I'm not having it in its point, and I don't think my partner's not having it either.
Yeah, like I said, this is I think in YouTube you can always go into a YouTube space or a room or something and have it out and have these battle royals. And me and Pete, we got tired of that. We just want to have two adult people who respect each other. I know Pete personally. We spend time, we broke bread together and whatnot. And this is just us having some coffee, some Greek coffee, and we're just talking over some issues, because I don't drink alcohol. So again, it would definitely have to be coffee. So we're just chatting it up on a Sunday night as we wind down our week and prepare for the next week, as we hope you're doing as well. So, but again, we appreciate those who decide to be part of the conversation and whatnot, and just to hear us. And again, you're free to certainly express yourself in the chat. Again, but anything that's profane, again, we're certainly gonna certainly disallow that. But yes, discourse, we should, is no longer allowed with some individuals, but we should allow discourse, but not discord. Again, like I said, we've been been a part of a lot of battle royals as of late, and we're trying to do that. I can't believe it. She's back after this weekend. Catalia in the house. Yes, it's been a minute. Where have you been? You missed a lot of good content. We would have loved to have gotten your feedback some time back, but I guess it's the taxes. So again, and anytime you mention taxes, that brings people from the bench or whatever. But hopefully you enjoyed the weekend with the draft being in Pittsburgh. I know we're both diehard Steeler fans, so again, hopefully you were satisfied with the presentation and whatnot. And I must admit, Eli Heinreich got drafted in the 7th round. Navy guy to Navy joined the Steelers. That was a pretty cool moment seeing that. But again, it's good seeing you. Hope everything is well with you and your family and whatnot. And please don't be a stranger. Please, make sure you hop on with us. We haven't left. We're here, same bat time, same bat channel every single week. So again, it's good to have you back in the house tonight. But let's get into this a little bit. So again, as usual, I try to set the stage or set the conversation around some information that we can then have a good conversation about. So again, so I have some slides I want to kind of go through here, and we can certainly talk through the slides as I show them. But certainly this really helps to kind of keep things keeps things in perspectives, and so I always like to share. So let me just share my screen right now, and I'll bring up.
So as you're doing that, let me put my 2 cents in really fast here, if you don't mind. So I'm gonna be one of the crazy ones who thinks taxes are necessary, because very simple. You need cops to get paid. You need damn, my brain is froze. Medical professionals to get paid. Social security, all this stuff, war work, all the construction stuff. That had to get paid somewhere.
Yeah,
I don't think anybody should be exempted of it. Even the president.
Gotcha.
I think every single person should be paying taxes.
Yeah, now, and it's interesting tonight, just to kind of level set real quick, we're going to be talking mostly about the federal tax system tonight. So we're not going to deal with state and local taxes. You can certainly, extrapolate this conversation to that, and, however your own local municipalities, how they deal with taxes and whatnot, certainly that's a discussion that you're certainly free to have, or take some of the principles that we're talking about. But certainly the big elephant in the room is certainly the federal situation. And so we're going to talk about that certainly tonight. That's going to be the bulk of our conversation. But again, for the state and local stuff, I think you certainly need to be informed of that. And certainly I think it's almost easier on a lot of fronts to have that conversation more easy, or more affect what happens on the local level than you do certainly with the federal one. So so again, that's going to be the framing of the conversation tonight. But I just wanted to kind of start out with a quote. So again, so I look for attribution to this. So Benjamin Franklin, he famously said, "The only things of certainty are death and taxes in the world." So again, he was cited as the person who kind of came up with that phrase, and for a lot of people, they find that to be very true. But I also want to kind of give, and again, I'm not getting Bible-y tonight or anything like that, but I just found it interesting because I've seen a lot of conservative persons who certainly embrace a low or no tax sort of platform and whatnot, and they always make the case for paying less taxes. And again, that's a valid debate to have. But I just want to kind of go to the scriptures a little bit because again, we all know what Jesus said. Again, render unto Caesar's what the things of Caesar's and the things that are God's. So again, it's like the Bible is not saying that you don't pay taxes. In fact, Paul makes even a case here. It says this is why you pay taxes, for the authorities that are God's servants who give their full time to governing. Give everyone to what you owe him. Owe taxes, pay taxes. Revenue, then revenue. If respect, then respect. If honor, then honor. So I don't think that's certainly those who make a case that there shouldn't be any taxes at all are, certainly, I don't know where that case is made. You could even make a case even in the Old Testament that the tithes that you paid in the Old Testament were taxes because those tithes went to the Levites who ran the government. They were not only responsible for the priestly worship, they also were your judges. They were responsible for weights and measures and a lot of things that were going on in society. And there were 3 tithes that were paid in the Old Testament. One went to the Levites for their sustenance. You had a tenth that went to a storehouse for national security, and then you had one every 3 years that went 10% every 3 years. That was for an annual festival every year. So again, the idea of people not paying taxes or that certain for governments or for institutions or for nations to run, that to not exact monies from the populace that benefits from that, just as a principle, whether you go back thousands of years or even up to current day, you still have a lot of certainly there is even support for that. So I just want to kind of raise that because, like I said, I know some people, they're very apt to quote the scriptures and things like that, or talk about low or no taxes. But even the Bible makes a case for and gives a reason why we pay taxes. Now, again, how much we pay, that's a discussion, right? That's a fair discussion to have. Should it be 10%, 20, 30, 40%, whatever the rate is? We can have a healthy debate about that. But as far as to pay taxes or not pay taxes, certainly that is something we're talking about. So I just want to kind of level set those. Pete, I don't know if you had any questions on that, but to your earlier point, I think this may support some of the things that you had said earlier.
No, nothing right now. You can continue with the slide.
Gotcha. All right, so just kind of give a history lesson real quick in terms of how we got here, how we got to the current state. So again, federal taxes, the 16th Amendment was instituted the federal income tax. So this is back in 1913, and initially it was a very small set of information. It was only 4 pages, but now it's over 126 pages. The tax code, certainly as it is today in 1913, the top bracket on all income over $500,000 in 1913, which is the equivalent of $11 million today, was 7%, and the lowest bracket was 1%. But then as the country started to develop, as it started to get larger, people started paying more and more taxes. So again, wars tend to add, because again, you need to build bullets and weapons of different kinds. So in World War I, in order to finance World War I, Congress passed the 1916 Revenue Act and the War Revenue Act in 1917. So again, the tax rate jumped from 15% in 1916 to 67%. In 1917 to 77% in 1918. War is expensive. And then after the war, it dropped down to 25%. So again, to fund certain things, the government passed laws and bills so that certain things could be paid for. Then you have the Great Depression time period. Congress raised taxes again in 1932 from 25% to 63% of the on the top earners. So again, war, depressions, or whatnot, your tax rate can fluctuate again based on the needs of the day. Then you had World War II. Again, rates went up again. 1944, the top rate peaked at 94% on taxable income
of over $200,000, which is 2.5 million in today's dollars. Again, that's arguably the highest tax rate in history. And again, even after the wars, the 50s, the 60s, and 70s, the top rate on income, top earners never dipped below 70%. Then you had in the 80s, the Reagan Revolution came in, and he ran certainly on the platform of reducing taxes. So again, you have the Economic Recovery Act of 1981 slashed the highest rates from 70 to 50%. And then in 1986, you had another tax act that was put in place and dropped the tax rate to 28%, certainly at that time. And so further lawmakers claimed that that they would never raise to the 28% rate. The 28% rate promise lasted 3 years before it was broken. Get more into the 90s and the modern time. During the 90s, so you got the Clinton era and whatnot, it certainly jumped up on upper earners to 39.6% in the 90s. But the Economic Growth and Tax Relief Act of 2001, this is during the Bush era, dropped it from the rate to 35%. So it went from 39.6 to 35%, and that lasted through 2010. The Tax Relief and Unemployment Insurance Reauthorization Act and the Job Recreation Act of 2010 maintained that 35% through 2012. You had another set of acts in 2012 where, again, the top rate was increased back to 39.6%. So we've been hovering around this. But then when you had the Affordable Care Act came out, that rate actually increased to 43.2. And then in the modern era that we're in, the lower era right now I know they're trying to pass a bill, the big, beautiful bill, that'll hopefully, for a lot of individuals, they hope that's going to reduce the tax rate again for high income earners, but the highest income rate was lowered to 37% in the beginning years of 2018. The additional 3.8% is still applicable, making the maximum federal tax rate of 40.8%. But certainly, again, we've seen fluctuations over time. And just to put this in a graphic way, so you can see, starting in 1913. Obviously it started out pretty low with wars, with recessions, and all those kind of things. Certainly the rate has increased and it's been lowered. So it's been hovering around, again, 2026, the upper rate is around 40%. So for a lot of people, who complain about how high it is now, it was way higher back then. But as we said in the last show, people have had, all types of tax shelters in ways. If you got a smart accountant who've gotten away from being able to pay a lot of taxes, especially at the corporate level, because using different instruments, all right, all kinds of tax exemptions, nonprofit organizations, offshoring accounts and whatnot. There's always been ways to get around this messy tax code, which again started out as only 4 pages back in 1913 to now it's over 126 pages now. I mean, you literally need to be an expert, like, a real accountant to kind of know how these things work. And if you're an accountant, if someone who has that background in the chat, I know Lunatic Libertarian, you've been long stroking certainly the whole time. Again, certainly everything I've seen so far, you've been certainly respectful. You're making your points. No problem with that. I may not be able to show everything. Certainly as we go through the show, but certainly you say you could go on, and certainly you've done so. But again, no problem. Share your points in the chat. So this kind of gives you a statistical from year to year what the tax code, what the tax rates have been historically in the nation. Now, also keep in mind, one of the biggest periods of expansion in the nation did happen after World War II. So when you talk about the national highway systems, when you talk about the, a lot of social service programs and whatnot, all that ballooned and bubbled in that period after 1945. And so when you had those higher tax rates, could you have done a lot of those projects if you didn't have those higher tax rates? Again, that is also debatable. And what is also what we need to being mute.
That's why I was laughing before. I saw that. I'm like, you can't fucking do it.
Yeah.
Hey, you stroked it. You said it.
Yeah. So shout out to our shout out to Mandrell in the business in the building tonight. Good to have you here. So again, you did have this economic boom of growth in the country. You had baby boomers came back from World War II. Everyone was having families. Everyone was having babies. You had this big growth in the country and whatnot when you had these upper rates, which is why some people, again, whether I agree or not, that's not the issue tonight, but some people make a case that we need to go back to these higher rates because that's when America was at its quote unquote greatest in the 40s, 50s, and 60s when we were booming as a nation when you had these high end rates. But we also know about the spending. When Harry Truman was in office, what was being spent in the military was just ridiculous in terms of what they were charging for certain things. So again, when you have government, it's one thing to bring in money, but then you also it's fair to ask the question, what are we spending our money on, and how much are we charging for things that we're buying that the government is spending our money on? I think those are fair questions to ask, and so that's another conversation as well. And certainly I'll show some charts when we go there as well. But just on the U.S. Just on just what I showed so far. What are any thoughts that you have on what I've shared so far?
So it's been fluctuating, like you said, and that's the scariest part about us taxpayers. It goes up and down, up and down. And honestly, yes, I agree on people who are making more need to pay more, but people who don't make more they pay more. I don't agree with that.
State that again. You said for those who make more, they should pay more. But what was the second part?
And the people who don't make more, let's say you're at $55,000 a year for the last 6 years, for argument's sake, right?
Mm-hmm.
Your tax still increase somehow. I don't agree with that because the tax changes over the years.
Well, I don't know if it's necessarily the taxes that are increasing or just the cost of living. That's another, when you talk about inflation,
that's a different conversation,
right? But I think that's where a lot of for the people who are on the lower end of the tax room, I think that's what helps them most. When you got to go for gas, you see how much gas costs. That's not necessarily an impact on tax policy. Those are inflationary and supply and demand type of measures that are affecting someone's bottom line in terms of what they're spending on. But again, typically you're going to be affected at the rate wherever your income is when you when we go there. Now, one thing that certainly Lunatic, he did mention, like I said, I'm not going to be able to do everything. And we're going to talk about some of the things. So you talk about what growth, the debt from the war was how much, the industrial complex, Korea, Vietnam, et cetera. Again, we've seen certainly an increase in tax revenues to fund a lot of those things. And certainly one thing I would also agree with, we got off the gold standard, where, again, a lot of our money is kind of like paper money. Like we used to base everything on the dollar. When we instituted that 16th Amendment in 1913, we got off of the gold standard. And that was certainly something that certainly changed. And, certainly a lot of our currency almost became like fiat currency, where it's like, we were able to print money to an extent. But again, it's not really based on anything. So again, and I have heard arguments where people have said, we need to go back to a gold standard of some kind and have our money based on something that's tangible versus just these inflated dollars and this unlimited ability to print money. So certainly that argument.
Here's my issue with the dollar right now. Like, if you're going to go off that paper money, you can't really go off that because paper money is literally obsolete at this point. Everybody's using digital money.
Yeah, but I think in that space, I mean, as far as what is accepted as legal tender in this country, I think we can use those to mean the same thing, whether it be digital money or paper. Now, crypto, I don't know much about that. That to me, that's like another thing, but that's not even accepted, in real dollars. You're still going to have to convert some of that crypto money into something that's what's considered legal tender if you want to buy things with it. And so that's a speculative market that I admit that I'm not as well versed in. But whether you have paper money or digital, I get paid by direct deposit and whatnot, so money just passing electronically or whatever, I still consider those things to be the same. And so again, I can tell you that's what messed up everything. We're supposed to stay on the gold standard. Yeah, a lot of people have been saying that the feasible fiat has no currency.
And I got Anton certainly he's in the building tonight as well. So again, shout out to you as well. And again, that whole idea of the dollar, that's another conversation. So again, we're taking a very specific slice of this conversation talking about taxes. And so I want to keep it sort of in that realm, but certainly as an offshoot of that, obviously the monies that we're taking in, again, what are we buying with it, and are we overpricing things because of it? So I certainly think those are things that are worth having. But just to kind of give a comparison globally, how we're doing globally with the other nations. So again, some nations, again, on average, you're talking about 22%. Again, America is not the most taxed. There's other countries that have higher tax brackets than we do. This is based on 2022 sources. So a lot of Europe and Soviet Union actually has lower tax rates, but at the same time, a lot of those nations don't have necessarily their own militaries. Like a lot of those NATO nations, for example, they do rely on a lot of NATO or U.S. support for their militaries sort of to back them up. So again, we do spend a good portion of the monies that we take in on the military industrial complex, which I'll talk about certainly in a little bit. But again, some countries like in Brazil, South America, much higher tax rates than what we have in the U.S. So for people who think that U.S. we pay the most taxes in the U.S., that isn't true. You have a lot of nations that pay a lot more in taxes than we do, and you can certainly look at this chart here and see which nations, and you see a lot of these, again, a lot of these European nations, they pay a lot more of their money, some nearing 50% of their money. Denmark, France, whatnot, they have large social service networks. They do free education, free college. They do, a long-term parent leave, pay leave for parenting. There's a lot of social services. Their rails and transportation systems and whatnot. So a lot of their monies that they are collecting from their citizenry does go for a lot of those social safety nets and social services in the nation. Compared to a lot of those, U.S. has a relatively low percent in terms of percentage of their GDP. It's only 27%. But countries like Canada, we know that people pay higher taxes in Canada. Canada is also much higher than ours. But we're not the worst in the world as a percentage of our GDP as far as the taxes that we pay certainly as a nation. There are higher ones, and Greece is actually very high, nearing 40% in terms of paying. So from your experience, Pete, people that in Greece. Do they complain? Do they talk about the high level of taxation in Greece?
I don't need to ask anybody. I deal with it myself personally because I forget. I still own property in Greece.
Yeah.
So we deal with it on a daily basis. Like that's why my mom keeps on tabs on the Greek news. Every time I turn the news, you get taxed on because you're having an elevator. You get taxed because you have XYZ. Excuse me 1 second. Sorry about that. You get taxed over the stupidest shit.
Mm-hmm.
They're taxing you because you own 2 apartments. That part I kind of understand, but the taxes are ridiculous in Greece. It is beyond ridiculous at this point.
Right.
It is no standard there. Like here, we had our rights here is on paper. In Greece, that went out the window after they took down the president. The king.
Mm-hmm.
He was the one saying, no, you're not doing that. Now, who's going to stop saying what they want to do? Think what I'm saying.
Yeah. So, shout out to Anton in the building tonight. So, again, Europe, as I think I made the point earlier, Europe pay more, Europeans certainly pay more in taxes, but have, again, better infrastructure system than in the United States. So, certainly, but again, just relatively speaking, people are always, sort of complaining about, how much we pay in taxes here. But again, there's other obviously worse situations. Katia says Bitcoin, and certainly a lot of these are top cryptos are shaping the future of digital assets. I hope so. Look, like I said, I don't know a lot about those exchanges and those types of money. And we can get Reckless Ray or somebody who can certainly spin on that. I'm not sure. I know there's certain nations. I think some nations in Africa are starting to use crypto or some of these digital currencies as in daily exchanges and whatnot. But unless it has some universality where again it's going to be accepted, we don't know. To me it's still a speculative market. But again, I'm not for or against it. Again, I'm very much agnostic on it, and I would certainly have to do a lot more research on it to certainly be able to speak intelligently on it. But it is certainly something that certainly even this current administration, I know they've gone in certainly on cryptocurrency, which certainly if you own shares in Bitcoin and these other digital products, obviously you're going to be you're going to be amenable to that. Here you have from the lunatic libertarian: anarchy, self-reliance, self-production, self-regulation, the only true system. Certainly again appreciate you sharing your point there. Just want to go a little bit into, again, let's talk about the deficits a little bit, because again the whole idea is you're taking in tax money but then we're spending, and again that could be another conversation. What are we spending versus what are we taking in? So again, if you look at this is the national debt by year, and obviously it's skyrocketed certainly in the 21st century. We've certainly seen the big boom in that, but relative to what it was in the past, again during the Reagan era, Reagan-Bush era, it went up a lot because I know he spent a lot in, obviously he brought down the tax rates. Again, it was 70% for a long time, dropped it into the 50% range, and then he also built up the military. He had a lot of investment there, so that drove up deficits. Certainly in the 80s, I remember being in class when we used to talk about that, how the deficits went up. Deficits have basically gone up over every president. So again, it's funny, we have these conversations, Democrat versus Republican or whatever. All these guys are driving up debt. Even in Trump's first year, the debt has already been increased by a good margin, and this is just his first year. We got three more years of this, but nobody's talking about balanced budgets. No one's talking about again where our money is going. But certainly the Biden presidency as well as the Trump presidency, no one can say that certainly everybody kind of got their beaks wet. Certainly in this time where the debt has gone up. Again, if you just look at it by president, I mean Biden, certainly added over $8 trillion, but Trump, he's right behind him, and he's already added certainly a good chunk already. The Obama years was increases, the Bush years, highest increases in history. Again, Woodrow Wilson. Again, this is certainly in the early. The late teens, early 20s, but again, you didn't have, certainly compared to today, you didn't have a ton of national debt. You only had a couple $1 billion of national debt at that particular time. So again, presidents have certainly have added to certainly added to this. Certainly, again, chronologically, again, I'm only going to be dealing with, again, the recent presidents, certainly in the last 20-something years. And again, each one of them has increased the national debt, regardless of the tax rate that they were at. The national debt has certainly been increased under all these presidents. So again, I'm not shilling for one side or the other. I'm just saying that all these guys have certainly had a hand in in certainly that debt going up. Now, where is our money going? So when we talk about spending, so just here, this is again, yeah. So again, this is a committee for responsible budgets. So again, we're spending $6.8 trillion, but the revenues that we're bringing in, this was back in fiscal year 2024, is $4.9 trillion. And so, you have, certainly a lot of it goes into the social safety nets, again, Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid. Again, the defense is about $900 billion. And again, the president was just asking, he wants another $1.5 trillion for military spending. Obviously, we have a conflict in Iran that we're dealing with. So again, more money is being asked to pay for a lot of these measures. But again, are we bringing in the money to pay for these things? And when we don't, this is why our national debt is increasing, because you have more and more need for a lot of this this sort of spending, both mandatory spending like Social Security. That's by law that we have to fund a lot of these things. Are discretionary, is the military budget is a good portion is a good portion of that. And so we gotta, so this is where our monies are going, but again, is it matching the revenues? And then the conversation becomes: is this a demand or supply side issue? Do we need to cut spending, or do we need to raise revenues? And what's the best way to do that? With causing sort of limited pain on one side or another. Do you hurt business, or do you hurt the general population? That's always the debate that certainly Democrats and Republicans always get into. Again, I'm not going to get into a long conversation on that. But again, I just want to focus on, again, what our tax dollars, again, what are those things that are certainly going to that. Just to kind of also give you a breakdown. So we have currently what we've had this progressive tax system. So again, this is to support what you were saying, Pete. Again, the more money that you make, the more money you pay in taxes. So again, the upper percentage right now is 37% or 40%, depending on the ratio there. But generally, any income, whether if you're a single filer over 640,000, you're paying the topmost percent at 37, or if you're married filing jointly, they bump it up a little bit to 768. But again, based on your bracket. So if you're not making a lot of money, you were talking about the guy making 50,000 or 55,000. He or she's gonna be in the 22% bracket at that point in time. And what I do like is, now there used to be something called the marriage tax penalty, where again, if you both were filing, your tax bracket would actually go up and you would pay more in taxes because you were married. I would like to see a reverse of that. I would like to see where, again, being married, having children or whatever, have a lower rate, because again, for a lot of people, they're saying, they're saying that, people aren't getting married and having children, and what's that going to do to our economy long term? So again, if that is of a national concern, then should married people also get a break being taxed at the same tax bracket as a single single tax?
Time out
bracket.
1 second.
Yeah.
I like the King Smith comment really fast.
Mm-hmm.
We're pretty much going over taxes. And King, I know you're familiar with Bitcoin and crypto. If you want to put your 2 cents in the comments, please, I guess, because me and Poe have no idea anything about that stuff. So
yeah, I think the point that I think Katalia was making the point is, again, in terms of the future. So currently, the way money works now is it's mostly fiat. Like I said, we moved from the gold standard back in 1913. And a lot of our money is simply what is printed on paper that the government accepts as legal tender. The Bitcoin and whatnot is not as of yet. People hold assets and whatnot. I think there might be a couple countries in Africa that are allowing for it to be used in commerce. Not sure if we'll ever get there where it will be accepted as that. So again, I think Katalia was optimistic about the future of it. So King, if you have some comments on where do you think crypto is going, will it be used as regular everyday currency or not? I think that's the question. Again, I don't know as much about it, but I do know people who are passionate about it, are heavily invested in it, or at least starting to at least put some monies into it. Certainly just as a reserve in case if it does go in. But I know some people, they're like all in on the crypto side. But mainly the topic tonight is not so much about currency. It's mostly about taxes, who's paying taxes, what are the upper rates where our tax money is going, and what we're going to get into a little bit later on is maybe are there some alternatives to tax systems that we can suggest. And again, we're having a conversation. We're not saying this is something that's going to be implemented and there's a lot of momentum for these things or whatever. We're having a conversation, like I said, just like we're having coffee. What if things were different? So again, for a lot of people, we get on us who say, oh, y'all talking about stuff that'll never happen. Maybe not. But we find the conversation interesting. That's why we're having it. And we hope that you find the conversation interesting because we're having it. Because I don't know where else these other conversations are being had.
So that's the genesis of the show. So if you're looking to us to be some sort of think tank, or that we got all the answers or solutions and whatnot, I know we got people in chat, lunatic libertarians. So like, you definitely have some proposals and things that you would certainly love to have implemented. And certainly I wouldn't doubt that you're working towards those things. Again, this is a conversation, not a think tank where we're trying to, we like as if we got things figured out. But again, we appreciate anybody who wants to be on the live tonight and be part of this conversation. Just some of the comments that were said earlier. Anton says, where your taxes going? A lot of things people already know, things that don't officially exist. Certainly that could be true. I can tell you the marriage tax penalty when married people pays more in income taxes than they would if they were unmarried, often affecting couples with similar incomes. Yeah, and I'm thinking if people are so concerned about marriage and family, then should married people get a break? Because doesn't that promote marriage and family, which is what a lot of people want? So again, that's just one of those things where it's just a suggestion, but yeah, just like people want different credits for things, and corporations are always asking for credits and whatnot. What about a marriage credit? If you decide to take that vow and whatnot, what if you did have something that gave you a little break and encouraged people to be married versus being single and combine your assets together? Again, some people would cringe at that idea, but it's certainly something worth asking. I can tell you, as of 2026, El Salvador and the Central African Republic have officially adopted cryptocurrency. I knew there was a place in Africa. I didn't know about South America, though. Legal tender with Bitcoin being recognized in both countries. Yes, I did know about the one country in Africa. Again, will it become widespread? Again, we'll certainly have to see in there. Lunatic libertarian, all subsidies are fraud, waste, abuse, and corruption. I don't think we disagree there, sir. and that's certainly, once we get into some of the alternatives and whatnot, maybe that's something that we can address. My man Eric's in the building here now. I was just composing a very important post in the Fandom Zone. Shout out to you for being here tonight. Certainly appreciate the support. Talk about, again, the spending. And Mandrell made the point earlier. So again, certainly we have a quote here from General Dwight D. Eisenhower, President Eisenhower. He was certainly Supreme Commander, Allied forces in World War II, and he had warned about not only the cost of war when we spend on military, that you basically, it says every gun that is made, every warship launched, every rocket fires signifies in the final sense theft from those who hunger and not fed, that those who are cold and are not clothed. This world in arms is not spending money alone. It is spending the sweat of its laborers, the genius of its scientists, and the hopes of its children. So again, he had a very nuanced view when it came to the cost of war, which is certainly there. And that's not to say that wars don't have to be fought. And I think he certainly understood that, especially World War II, that had to be fought. But he also gave us warning that, again, in the Council of Government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex. All right, so we see all of the private companies and whatnot that basically are in the business of making weapons for war. And the crazy profits that these guys are getting from that. Eisenhower was warning about that as he was leaving office in 1961. And so, so these are things that when we talk about, again, where our money is going, some people say that it's, we need to stop the social programs or whatnot, but they're very pro-defense and vice versa. We should spend less on bombs and more on schools and institutions and taking care of people and whatnot. So we always have had this balance, again, of where to spend our money. And again, that could be another discussion in terms of, but people tend to, have different values when it comes to this type of spending. But he did warn us that this could happen, and we're seeing it happen certainly now, where the military spending is certainly becoming a larger portion of our budget. And again, that's discretionary spending. Social Security and whatnot, those are locked in by law. Those things have to be paid or at least financed at a certain level. But discretionary military spending is all discretionary, and you ask Congress to pass bills that will to do that. We're not going to get into this here again. Aussie salty. I'll just read your comment just because I brought it up. I'm not trying to hide people here. Answer to your thumbnail question: because of your Freemason government, you are effing criminal. Just like Western countries that was sold us out as a democracy and freedom, it is literally social engineering. Again, thank you for your comment. From Catellia again. Eisenhower cautioned that excessive military spending could undermine democratic freedoms and divert resources from our societal needs. And, certainly lunatic as a military veteran, thank you. Those that watch equity, the military design of everyone being equal can apply. Appreciate you for that comment as well. So, again, he was very bullish on warning people that, what this could represent. Now, the question that I want to entertain really tonight, again, talk about taxes, is this idea is there maybe a better or an alternative system, or is the system that we have, is that the best system that's available? Yes, we got issues in terms of where we're spending money, why things cost the way they cost. Some people say we should do less spending in the government, have more spending in the private sector, that the private sector is more efficient at spending money than the federal government does. A lot of people have those sort of arguments. But again, given what we talked about last week with the nonprofits and the billions of dollars that are basically that no taxes are being paid on, are there other systems that may encourage better equity or give better results overall over these other types of systems, or at least the system that we all know of now, which is, again, a progressive system? The more you pay, in theory, and we know this doesn't happen, but the more you pay, or the more you earn, the higher your tax break, depending on the bracket. And in an earlier slide, I showed you what the brackets are. The upper limit is supposed to be 37%. But if you're a corporation, there's all kinds of ways you can get around spending. So there's other tax theories or models that have been introduced. So there's three. So the one that we're under now, again, a progressive tax system. Again, the more you make, the more you pay in proportion to your income. Okay, so again, a progressive tax, a tax in which the upper income families pay a larger share of their incomes in tax than those who do lower incomes. Now, from what I understood earlier, you're good with that.
Yeah.
Okay, so talk about that. I mean, what's the, again, because you got to sell the guy who's making more money. If I'm making a lot more money than you, why should I pay more? So you got to make the pitch to me. So why should I pay more if I'm making $500,000 a year plus or whatever? Why should I pay more than you when it comes to my tax rate?
Again, because you make more. End of story. If you go up, the tax goes up. That's how it always works in life. And when you make less, you make less.
Just like sell to me also.
I just say I can't. But Joe, shut up down there. I don't know how. I'm not a politician to tell you how to sell it. I really don't.
Mm-hmm.
Well, let's go with the other thing you said. Who should pay more taxes? The private sector, us, or the businesses? So I'm gonna play double advocate here. If you raise their taxes, they're gonna raise prices on their products. Mm-hmm. So eventually, us consumers are gonna pay more.
Right.
That's not fair either, right?
Right. So again, and not only that, the loopholes. Go ahead, finish your point.
Yeah.
You asked me a question and then you.
No. I'll let you answer it when I'm done with my double advocate. Now, let's do the other way. Let's say we raise the private sector, us, higher taxes, and not keep it in the business. That's still not fair. So now you answer me. How is that you make it fair?
I don't know if I can. That's the thing. I mean, I just accept the way it is. Again, I render unto Caesar what is Caesar's. But how can I make a case that because you make more money, you should have? Again, if you want me to appeal to your conscience or to your sense of, okay, well, basically you've been blessed with much. Too much is given, much is required. You want me to quote the Bible to you? I can try to do that. But again, any person who's making money, the whole idea is that you want to keep more of what you earn. I work hard for that money. I put a lot into the into the system, so I deserve the fruits of my labor and whatnot. Now, some people will push back and say, well, again, in the fact that you were able to build was because, again, there was an infrastructure that was built for you to make that money. So we talked about the tax system back in the 30s, the 40s, and the 50s when it was upwards of over 90%. That built roads, bridges, infrastructure that allowed you to make the sort of money that you have. And so because we invested in, the argument sometimes is, well, then you should be willing to pay more because were able to make you very wealthy based on the infrastructure that was built by tax dollars. And when we had that upper 90%, that is arguably people argue was the biggest growth. Again, some people argue like lunatic libertarian. Some people argue whether or not that was growth or not. But nevertheless, again, the highway system in the United States, what allows you to drive from New York to California, that was all built in that time. A lot of the dams were built in that time. Hydroelectric power plants and different big major national projects were built in that time with those higher tax rates. And now you're telling me as a rich person that you want to pay less in tax or significantly less in tax than what it is now. And it's already at the lowest point that it's been in decades. You had an upper rate of 94%. Now it's at 37%. And you're still saying to me that you're paying less, that you want to pay less in taxes. So that would be my pitch. Whether or not you want to agree with it or not, that would be the pushback on the person who says, well, why should I pay more in taxes? And even when I'm paying, you're talking about 37% of what I'm paying overall. Do you want to go back to the 90% what you had back in the day? But again, that's, like I said, I'm not an expert. I'm just giving my 2 cents in terms of what I've heard. But again, that's even for the first person, they're going to ask the question, should I pay more than you?
You having problems with that? I don't want to take I can hear what you're saying. Can you hear me? Okay, hit one. On your side. All right. If you guys can hear me, at least hit one, please. No sound at all. All right. Freaking King had to be in the show. That's what happened. All right. I'm not sure. your end. It's your end. Because every time you turn your mic on, you get static. You unplug your mic, or you have to set off and put it back in. And that might be the problem. All right, guys, I want to apologize for that. I'm going to blame King Smith because bad luck when it comes to technology. I have no idea where he left off because I thought it was my headset. That's why I jumped off camera to see what's going on. Obviously, it wasn't. Let's see if Paul can fix it, or this is gonna be maybe a very short show tonight. No idea where he left off. I do apologize, guys. It's stable because my Paul, you back yet? All right, 1 minute. Because I'm pretty sure it was coming from his mic. Because when he was talking, it was coming from it. Yeah, it's coming on your side, dude. I don't know what's going on. Sorry, I'm plugging like I told you. It's literally, I'm plugging completely. Yeah, come back in, come back out. All right. Again, I want to apologize, guys. We don't usually have these problems on this side of the show, but again, I'll blame King Smith. Every time King Smith shows up, we have problems. King. Again, I'm not sure where he left off, but there is no real good system about this. That was horrible. Yes, I know. It blew my eardrums out. Thank you. I know my eardrums are still paying for it. There is no real good system to implement, unfortunately. Yep. Hang on, let's see what he comes.
Okay, how am I sounding now? Okay.
Good. You blew my goddamn eardrums out.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Not sure what happened there, guys. Again, apologize for that. Hopefully, you guys, my man saying sabotage. Yeah. I don't know what happened there.
It was King Smith.
It was King. Blame it on King Smith. Okay. All right. We'll do that. But trying to remember now the last point I was on. But I guess the idea of, again, I don't know how you can sell to a higher earning individual. Now, again, you can say it's about, again, responsibility. Again, the more you pay supports the social programs and the infrastructure that builds the nation. I think that was Catalia's last point. And so, certainly that's an argument that's made. In fact, I'll just bring up that point again because I think that's where I left off before the problems had. Again, a person making higher income has to pay more in taxes because it is designed to ensure that those with higher earnings contribute a larger share to fund public services and government programs. And a lot of people, make that argument, but a lot of people hate that argument at the same time. Why should I fund government programs? Government programs are the problems. We talk about infrastructure. Again, lunatic libertarian, the infrastructure is garbage. It's built into the tax code that that depreciates assets, more valuable has decrepit buildings. So again, for a lot of people, they're saying that is in fact the problem. The issue is with again, the government is inefficient, and again, what we're spending on is really at issue. But the problem. But again, there's other alternatives. If you don't like the progressive system, and again, I know that certainly lunatic libertarian, assuming that you are, I'm not sure if you're a libertarian or not, or that's just a name that you're using. But here's a proposal that has been looked at. There are other types of tax systems that have been proposed. Now, there's another one actually that's called the regressive tax that goes completely opposite of what Peter and what Catelli was saying. The idea here is that the more you earn, the less you pay in taxes. And basically what that does, a regressive tax system requires the poor and middle income to pay a larger share of their incomes in taxes than the rich. Now, some people wouldn't say that. The reason why that should be is the message is don't be poor. Invest, put your money into other things, so it encourages people to get out from the bottom
as an incentive to want to join the higher income classes. Don't rely on government programs or bailouts or assistance, but get out of the lower classes as an incentive to motivate people to do something better. So a regressive tax system has been one that has been proposed. And then the last one, which I kind of can rock with. Now, this was out in the 90s. I know there were some libertarian candidates for president who talked about this idea of this flat tax. Instead of having a progressive or a regressive system, just have a value-added tax on spending. And so it's going to be proportionate in that. So again, if I make $1 million, I pay a flat rate. If I make $10,000, I pay a flat rate. And that would be fairer than this sort of progressive type of system. And also, you got to get rid of a lot of the loopholes. Get rid of all the 501cs and all of these loopholes that are in the tax code. Simplify the tax code completely, and your tax return should only be one sheet or one card that you fill out based on the spending that you did, and it's a much simpler way to go about it.
So that fair for the people who are low income,
because you're paying. Well, they say it is fair because again, you're only paying in percentage of what you earn. So let's say if the tax rate was at, in fact, I got a definition here. Let me go to this slide that talks about, in particular, the flat tax. So again, flat tax. Again, I know certain political candidates, certainly in the 90s, I really started hearing about this, and I do know a lot of libertarians who were talking about this as a proposal. So again, Hall-Rabushka flat tax would replace the current income tax system with a consumption tax. It is part of the two value system. A value added will be added tax at the business level, except wages, which would be deductible. Wages will be taxed at an individual level with an exemption based on family size. And they said that the tax should be 19% across the board, but you pay no other taxes. So it's 19%, and it's based on your profits. So again, so in short, the flat consumption tax, even though it looks like a wage to the households and a variant of the VAT to most businesses, therefore, except for the exemptions, the economic effects of the flat tax are essentially the same as those as the value-added tax or sales tax. The flat tax could be split into two parts. Again, the business tax and the individual tax. Firms will be responsible for paying taxes on the sales that they have, deducting wages, pensions, material costs, and capital investments. Individuals will be responsible for paying taxes again at a flat rate on the wages that the firms have deducted, but only on wages of an exemption level. So the idea is that there would be certain exemptions that a company gets. So you're a corporation. You can exempt your what you pay in wages, what you pay in terms of capital expenditures to make the product, but on every sale you pay 19% flat. No hidden costs, no hidden fees, no offshore whatever. It's just taken as taken on the sale of every item. The money's sort of taken right away. When you go to the store and buy something, you pay a 19%, but again, no other taxes. So you're already paying now. Like I said, if your tax rate, let's say if you're a $55,000 a year earner, you're paying 22% right now, your tax rate. If you go to 19%, that's a tax deduction for you. Now, certainly those who are making under that, those below the poverty line, yeah, you might have to have some exemptions or exceptions for that. Like, for example, you don't pay that tax on food and essential services, milk and bread and things of that nature. No essential foods that you may need. But for individual, if you want to go and buy that yacht, you're gonna pay that flat 19%. Most people on our income bracket, we're not buying yachts. We're going to buy for what we need on, but again, it's across the board, and it simplifies the tax code. At least this is the argument that has been made by a lot of people who push for a flat tax system. Now, it's interesting that I get into arguments with a lot of church folks over this idea of paying a flat tax, but they're big on tithing, right? They say, oh, well, whether you believe in tithing or not, again, that's a totally another show. But for a lot of people, the tithing or 10%, that was something that everybody was supposed to pay. So if you made a lot of produce, you paid a 10%, or lower, you paid 10%. So it's interesting that for a lot of people, they're pro tithing, but they're not for the flat tax because they just think it's unfair to those who pay at the lower income brackets. So these are like the three major proposals on the table. You have the regressive tax system, which some people opine for. Again, I'm not a fan of it. Catelli made a comment. A protective tax is a tax that takes a larger percentage of income from lower income earners than from higher incomes, meaning that as income increases, the tax rate effectively decreases. But that, again, people say that's what you should be working for anyway. Why do you want to stay poor? Why do you want to stay in the same bracket? You should be doing things to put yourself into a higher income bracket. And so as an incentive to get you out of it is why a lot of people say to do it and to invest your money. Again, why? So you can certainly earn more income. But for some people, especially, again, a lot of libertarians really pushed on the libertarian platform, that here Lunatic says, yes, I'm a libertarian. Flat tax is the most popular if a tax at all is implemented. And again, libertarians ran on this for years. And there were certain things, like I said, when you're going to call me a liberal or a Democrat or a Republican, I'm all over the map. You got to ask me the issue. I'm liberal on some issues. I'm conservative on some issues. I'm libertarian on certain issues. And so, again, I don't have I'm not having an advocacy for one position or the other, but certainly a lot of, when they talk about the flat tax, it makes sense to me, as long as, again, if you want to have some protections for those at the bottom. So if you're making, again, poverty line or less, do you get some sort of credit? Do you get some sort of like now what they do with the EBT cards or something like that, where you can buy stuff and not pay taxes on it? However you want to do it. But the hundreds of pages in tax code, if you could eliminate all of that, you wouldn't need as many people working at the IRS if you had this kind of flat tax type of system. And that's why a lot of people do it. So it's fair in that, again, if you got money to spend your money. You're going to be paying taxes on what you spent. And no, you can't deduct that yacht as a business expense. So again, the trade-off with the flat tax is none of this, oh yeah, my corporate yacht, yeah, I use that in promotion of my business, so it's a tax deduction. No. If you bought the yacht, you're paying the taxes on it, and we're taking the money for that there. So again, I've always thought that this was a fairer system if, and again, it's a big if you get rid of all these exemptions. You got to get rid of all of these write-offs and loopholes and dark monies, and you got to get rid of all of that. What you spend is what you pay on. I think that is relatively fair. Is it going to be easy to implement? No, because as Anton was saying earlier, everybody's making money off of the current rules in the tax code. But if you did go to something that is just a simple sales tax, and I don't pay any other taxes at the end of the year, I don't pay any other business taxes, only on what my revenues are, and the only thing I deduct is, again, certain expenses to run the business. I just pay taxes on my profits. I'm good with that. What about you? How do you feel about that? Presented in that way, if we can have somewhat of a safety net for those who are on the poor scale, could you rock with something like that, or do you still prefer the progressive system?
I need more information on it, but I am open to have negotiations and conversations about it.
Mm-hmm.
Because I don't completely understand it the way you broke it down, to be honest with you. But if somebody's willing to sit down and break it down to the T and dot the I's for me and explain it to me completely,
mm-hmm.
then the line of communications is open now.
Mm-hmm.
We can move forward from there. to see if it works or not. But I have to make sure it makes sense for me personally. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Today, taxes is also a little personal thing too, because every politician is looking out for themselves in tax wise. Can we agree on that?
I'm sorry, say that. Probably just reading the point. Say that one more time.
Most politicians look for themselves.
Oh yeah, I mean, all of them, like I said, all of them want to certainly wet their beaks in the current system. But the idea is, again, if the upper tax rate is 37%, or back in the day when it was like 90%, if you said we're just going to do a flat tax on sales and profits at 19% or 17% or whatever it is, there's less incentive to want to hide your money because, again, overall you're paying a lower percentage of your money. Now, Lunatic did mention, again, I was interested in H. Ross Perot back when he ran in 1992. I watched every infomercial that he bought on primetime TV in 1992, and he was a big believer in the tax rate, and I thought he actually did well in the debates with Clinton and Bush. He had me listening until he had the admiral that he picked as the vice president candidate. When he came out with that admiral guy, and he's like, "Why am I here?" I think that sunk it. But he did get some traction. I think he had the best numbers by an independent candidate in decades. I think he got something like 13% or 16% in that election. And so I was, like I said, I remember, like I said, I was interested. He kind of made a lot of sense. He talked about the spending. He talked about the military budget. And this guy was a military guy. He comes from a military background. He talked about the military-industrial complex. So you had a lot of people from both sides of the political aisle. I remember being in the lunchrooms at work talking with both liberals and Democrats about Perot and being like, maybe, But again, when it was a Stockdale, I think was the vice president's the candidate that came out, Admiral Stockdale. Everybody was like, no, that was like the worst mistake that he made. And again, I still don't know if he would have won. I mean, obviously, certainly it's very difficult for outsiders to win if you don't have any insights or you don't have a political apparatus. But again, it was grassroots. And again, he had me very entertained. He was self-made. I think his company was EDS. Built a company, and again, very, stern military guy. He tried to run again in '96, but again, I think the thrill was gone. I think in political campaigns, I think you have to take advantage of the moment. And again, I just think he can never get the magic back. But again, the fact that he had those, and again, I watched all of those, and I remember the debate he had with the Vice President Gore on CNN. He had a debate with Gore talking about NAFTA. And again, regardless of what you feel, some people think NAFTA was a win for the U.S. Some people said it was a big failure to the U.S. He was not a NAFTA guy. And they went at it and in the debate. So again, I was intrigued, but he couldn't get support. And again, the vice president pick, I just think that was people just weren't rocking with that, because you had a guy who was probably older than he was, and he always looked like he almost had Parkinson's himself. I mean, no diss, but the guy just wasn't sharp. Maybe back in the day or whatever, he had a distinguished military career. I don't want to, certainly diss that, but it was just raw. But some of my folks, y'all remember, again, Lunatic saying, go back and look at those privately funded debates, infomercials that he did. Those debates that were done back then, I thought they were, I've watched them over the years. Like, I've gone back because I'm a big history guy. So I went back and watched some of those. and he definitely scared a lot of people in terms of his, definitely, he definitely stirred a lot of people to action. But again, he couldn't build anything that was sustained. I think a lot of times when you're coming in, it's sort of like a popularity sort of thing. People were certainly not happy with H.W. Bush because of just the cost of things, the inflation, everything. Clinton, they were basically anybody but Bush. Clinton came in, and I guess he was sort of the moderate Democrat, guy that people thought was an alternative to Bush. But again, I think Ross had the room. But again, it's what you do with it. Yeah, you will never see a third party. Like I said, he did the best in that time, and I just remember a lot of guys was like, we can rock with this. So Gore's a billionaire based on climate policy that he implemented. He's a real probably human being. Yeah, I mean, a lot of guys again, they used what was there to benefit themselves, and Ross had an opportunity, but he's got to take some of the L on what happened in that time. But it was fun. It is probably to this day, it's probably one of my favorite campaigns. And like I said, I was a campaign junkie. Like I used to watch, even as a kid, I would watch the 70s. I think my first one was 76 with Carter and Ford. That might have been like the first time I really kind of got into politics. And then you had Carter and Reagan and just all those things that kind of came after. I was hooked into those things back in the day. But in short, Pete, the whole idea of the flat tax was, again, everybody pays the same rate either on what you buy or on your net profits across the board. So if you're making billions, you're paying that flat tax on billions. And again, you had a very simplified tax code at the time. And that you didn't need an accountant to kind of figure all these things out. So for a lot of people, they were, that was an alternative. Now, again, where that is now, again, libertarians, they've been trying to get back some sort of relevancy. I think certainly within libertarianism, and again, lunatic libertarian, you can correct me on this. There's been a lot of internal fights in the Libertarian Party. They've got their own internal issues that they got to sort out if they want to be relevant as a political voice again. But I heard there was like certainly in the last election or whatever, there was some major uphealings. Larry Sharpe. I heard Larry Sharpe. I heard him in a debate. I think during the 24 campaign, I listened to a lot of that. I listened to a lot of the libertarian debates, certainly at that time. And again, for a minute, libertarians had my interest, but it seems like to me, they sounded more like MAGA than what I typically knew as libertarians, at least in my view, from what I saw. I really, certainly in the 90s, I really tried to give the libertarians a shot. I kind of fell off for a minute, and I started trying to listen to them again because I didn't like where everything was going. And those guys, so again, I don't know what the state of your party is right now. But again, I heard there was a lot of turnover, there was a lot of defections, and there was a lot of you had the one guy who was in Congress who I believe was a libertarian during Trump's first term who left Congress. I think he might be of a Middle Eastern sort of background. Again, I can't remember his name off the top, but I know he was a major voice, but he had left. But he seemed like, again, a reasonable person. But he's no longer in office anymore. And I think, if anything, when they had all that upheaval in the Libertarian Party, I think he basically got pushed out. So, so again, that's all I know about, the libertarian side of things. But I'm going to just drop here. But we could just have, again, just a general conversation. But again, I just want people to know that, again, I'm open to all types of alternatives. If you don't like the progressive system, like I said, I'll render unto Caesar what is Caesar's. If you don't like the progressive tax system, figure something else out. What else do you have? Or like Pete is very satisfied with the existing system. My only pushback would be those people aren't paying taxes.
And that's the issue. Like most of those people, like Trump got exempt. I don't think nobody should be exempt. If you're in this country,
there you go. Thank you. Yeah, Justin Amash. I like Justin Amash. I thought he was a reasonable guy. I was listening to what he was saying. And I don't know what happened, but there was like some big internal, stuff that was going on, and I think they bounced him out. Or you had some more conservative wings of the Libertarian Party that got influence, and it was too much for him. But when he was in office, I thought he was a reasonable guy that I would have listened to. And I've heard several interviews and whatnot by him. I thought he was reasonable, but they didn't want him. So like I said, I don't know what the current state of the party is now. But thanks for bringing that reference up. I appreciate it. But I'm sorry to cut you off, Pete, but I just wanted to acknowledge
No, it's fine. Like I said, if we can find a way for everybody to pay, I don't care your nonprofit, a this or that, everybody pays. I think we'll be in a better shape, and that's the problem we're having right now. People find exemptions. There should be no exemptions. You're making money, you're getting paid. The only people who get exemptions are people who are homeless. Simple as that.
Yeah, and I think so obviously we got to go back to the I guess that Supreme Court case where you had with one of the justices who's no longer with us. You talk about corporations are people too. When corporations were able to buy into political campaigns, and you started having people able to give millions through different PACs and whatnot to political campaigns, I think that really messed a lot of things up. In the political process, also, where corporations had a lot more influence over politicians and corporate policy. But I thought that Supreme Court case, I think, really screwed a lot of things up for people, and that is also why it's less likely. So if I went back to Justin Lunatic Librarian's points again after the Ross Perot revolution. People were like, we can't get close to this again. And then in the fact, let me see if I can find that case. Corporations. Yeah, I think it was Scalia, Antonin Scalia, and I think he was known for saying that. Yeah, Citizens United back in 2010. So I think those two acts in and of themselves were, were really put, I guess, a death nail into why people are, frustrated, certainly with the system, or not allowing for that. Now, again, if the Libertarian Party can get some traction, and you can certainly figure out some things. Now, again, lunatic libertarians, wide spectrum political views. That's why so much infighting. True, but again, like anything else, a divided house cannot stand. And again, I thought a lot of the rhetoric I was hearing sounded a lot more MAGA and right wing than what I typically knew libertarians to be, which was pretty embracing of everybody, for at least from the 90s. Like I said, I know a lot of, especially African Americans. I know a lot of brothers who were like, "Yeah, I can get with Ross Perot." And so the brand, or at least the tone that he was giving, and you talked earlier about the Pauls, certainly Ron Paul, and certainly his father, when they ran for office. Again, they were anti-interventionist. They were anti-military-industrial complex. And certainly that was there for a minute. And from what I understand, certainly with the father, they got rid of him too. So like I said, you put up people that have, had some things to say that seemed reasonable, especially when Paul, the father, was running, and we had Iraq war and whatnot, and what was coming out of that, and people were tired of that thing. Bush wasn't popular at the time, so again there was an opening. But again, that infighting, you can't get anywhere with that. The one thing I've always said about the difference between Democrats and Republicans, not getting over political here, it says Democrats fall in love and Republicans fall in line. And when it was time for people to align their votes, you can go into the booth holding your nose for somebody, but it's like, I'm voting Republican, or I'm voting this or that. Democrats, it's like, yeah, we got to love you. And it seems like, with libertarians, there was this idea of these ideologies.
And if you're not with this certain ideology or whatever, then I'm bouncing. And nobody can, really have any influence that way. But again, I remember the 90s, and I remember that time, and that was a moment. Now, if this guy who's running for governor of New York, Larry Sharpe, if he can get into like the 20s in terms of percentage, then look, that's something that you can possibly build on. If he gets less than 5% of the vote or not even on the ballot, then I don't know where you guys guys go. Now, Ralph Nader, I don't think he was he with the Libertarian? No, I thought he was with the Green Party, if I recall from back in the day, Ralph Nader. Again, a lot of those same points, anti-interventionist, anti-industrial complex, government spending. Back in the day, a lot of people backed Ralph Nader. Because, again, the idea of, where our tax money's going, he spoke to that. But, again, that whole faction, the Green Party, that imploded. Again, over values and over discussions, So still a third party. Yeah, it's hard now. I agree with you. So whether or not the Libertarians can make a comeback or not, and certainly be a voice in the room, so that's to be decided. But hopefully, certainly, we have a lot of well-informed people, obviously, in the chat. About taxes and about things. I certainly tried to share to a larger audience, again, the history, how we got here, in terms of tax policy and codes, and the current system that we live under, for better, for worse. And again, from last week's show, we talk about how people oftentimes use 501cs to hide a lot of the money that they're taking in, being able to take in billions of dollars and not pay taxes on that money. All those things are there. But again, if we want something different, and again, I'm not running for office. So neither is Pete.
For me.
And neither is Pete. So again,
Right.
Again, we don't have the ideas, but certainly I think for a lot of people, if you're frustrated with the way things are, if it looks like you're paying more money into the system and getting less out of it, certainly. I'm sure you're having these conversations with people who You're having conversations on the at the restaurant or at the bar or whatever, talking about these same issues. And we just decided that we wanted to have this conversation over the last couple of shows, talk about our views on how certain things are. I accept the progressive tax system. I would love to see a flat tax system, how that could be implemented. Again, but as long as you can promise me you can get rid of all the loopholes, I can see a flat tax system working. But you got to clean up some things. And as far as the regressive tax, that one I'm not sure about. As far as everyone, that's really picking up your bootstraps and really, getting into a higher tax bracket. Again, I think just history has shown few people. I think there's rules of 80-20. 20% of people are responsible for 80% of production. And I think that certainly, I don't think you could motivate enough people to want to get out of the lower classes to support that and make it work. But a flat tax, you could have sold me on it back in 1992. But again, Admiral Stockdale, I'm sorry. You lost a whole lot of us when you were introduced on stage for that. But I can tell you, thank you so much. Again, it's so good to see you again. And please don't be a stranger in the place. But I'm glad you certainly enjoyed the what's that?
I said I think we kind of missed seeing her around. We haven't seen her in a while.
No, we haven't. Well, she might have been lurking in the background, but certainly this is her first time certainly engaging the chat again in a while. So, but again, just hope that she's good and hopefully that she's doing well. The lunatic. Now again, certainly first of all, I appreciate you being here. Whether we agree or disagree on stuff, and again, sorry I didn't get to all the content, but you definitely seem to, at least on the positions that you understand. Again, so I'm interviewing governor candidate in I think that's Wisconsin next month, and she's a Democrat socialist. She's already in the assembly. So, it seems like you're politically active. You know your points, whether or not people you can sell people on your points of view or whatnot. You definitely seem very passionate about what you're doing. And again, you're always welcome, certainly on topics like this, to certainly share your views. Like I said, we got a call-in show next week. If you want to be a part of that conversation, talk about anything that we've talked about or the last couple shows, go back and look at some of our content. You're more than free to go there and do that, and come up and be part of the conversation as long as you cam up. We'd love to have you be part of that conversation. But again, the whole purpose of this show is for two people who come from two different backgrounds, two different life experiences. Can we have a reasonable conversation? Not to say that we're experts on anything, but can we have a reasonable conversation over certain topics and issues that really affect all of us? Like I said, it doesn't matter where you are in the world. You're affected by some sort of tax policy. Living under different governments, whether democracies or imperial type situations or communist governments or whatever, all of us are affected by tax policy. We oftentimes find ourselves more alike than different. Hence the issue, the title of the show, The Gray Area. And again, we appreciate you being subscribed to the show. Certainly thank you very much for that. And again, nuance is missing in these conversations. And again, we're not, certainly, again, if this was a think tank and I got my PhD in political science and economy from Harvard or Yale or whatever, then yeah, I mean, there's content for that out there. We're sharing our opinions. We invite people to share theirs. If you can certainly add a nuance to a conversation that we might be lacking and that we're better for it, we'd appreciate that as well. But again, the show is, like I said, I tell people all the time, if you're looking for us to find the solutions to the world's problems, keep looking. Because there's a lot of people that are smarter than us. And that you're a master tradesman, again, shout out to you. Certainly, like I said, if we ever get the opportunity to interact with you, certainly I would look forward to that. But I think we spent, certainly a good amount of time here, certainly on these topics the last couple of weeks. We can start to certainly land this plane a little bit, give you guys a little bit more of your time back on Sundays. But again, can't tell you enough. Appreciate you guys being here. It never ceases to amaze me that, certainly on a Sunday night, people got to get ready for work, got to get kids ready for whatnot. And you guys decide to spend your Sunday nights with us when, you got the NBA playoffs going on. My guy Anton, you got the NHL playoffs going on and whatnot. And you might be watching the game in the background while still listening to us. We appreciate, again, what you guys, how you guys choose to spend your time with us. We don't take that for granted here. And but with that, I think we can start to land. So again, get into final thoughts, certainly on this topic, or certainly from the topic from last week. Taxes is a very complicated area, but it certainly affects all of our lives in one way or another. And regardless of what side you're on, a lot of us feel that things are unfair. So again, you got the wealthy that thinks it's unfair. You got people who are poor who thinks it's unfair. People in the middle who think it's unfair. And everyone's asking, is there a better way to do things that we can all sort of buy into and be happy, if there is such a thing, to pay taxes? Because again, it does fund certain things in this country that we depend on. Or are you the type of person who's like, we shouldn't have any tax at all and just let private industry do everything? Those are conversations that everybody has at a certain level. But again, I think that's my final thought for the day. But again, sorry, Ross. Salute to you, sir. Yeah, you almost had me back in 1992. All right. And that's an era that, again, I've gone back so many times and watched those debates and times. You almost had me. But you had a missed up there that was costly. You never recovered from it. But Pete, I'll turn it over to you for final thoughts so we can get out here a little bit early tonight.
If we find a fair way, a simple way, a good way that works for everybody, I'm all for it. But I don't think it's going to be like that easy, unfortunately. Because one side has cut the military's funding. I disagree with that completely. The other says cut that funding, do this, do that. Let the rich ones get away with it, no pain, like Trump. How can you make it fair? That is my argument statement. Because you can't right now. I feel like. I'll leave it there.
Yeah, and I didn't get a chance to talk about it a lot. I mean, certainly for those who are like less taxes, I think can everybody be at least of the ilk that Reagan sold us on trickle down economics. That if you cut the tax rates on the upper income earners, that all those benefits, wages, and everything would trickle down to the lower income brackets. That they would take, the government takes care of the businesses, and the business will take care of the employees. Do you believe that? Did you ever believe that as a policy, as a way of going forward? I mean, that's how it was pitched, and that's how it was sold. But all it did was it added to more national debt. The debt got into the trillions under Reagan, and it's been growing ever since. So, certainly can we put that theory to rest of trickle down economics? But again, people still try to sell it. That again, if we want to have increased GDP, we want growth and whatnot, cut taxes on businesses. We've been sold this, but again, I don't know if we've had Bush administrations, Reagan administrations, Trump administrations. It hasn't manifested. So again, do we need to start thinking about something else? I don't think you should tax the rich to kingdom come, but can we do something? So things to think about, but again, certainly make sure you hit the like button, certainly on the way out. And again, not only here on Black Man Unfiltered, but also again, jump on over to Sparta HQ Network, hit the subscribe button there as well. Drop a like certainly for this show and for this content. If you appreciate the sort of content that we give you guys on a weekly basis, we'll be back next week. Again, next week is again our call-in show. Next week. So again, on all of these topics we've been talking about over the last few weeks. Any you guys want to be part of the conversation, you're more than welcome to come up to it. But certainly for myself, Mr. Bennett, and he is the Ghost of Sparta, a.k.a. Peter, a.k.a. Panayotis. This is the gray area. Certainly looking forward to seeing you guys next week. Enjoy your week. So for myself and Pete, take care. God bless, and we will see you next time. Good night.